It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the LSE SU India Forum Entertainment Business Panel. My name is Pranav Bhimsetti, and I'm part of the LIF 2021 team. And today we're going to have like an insightful discussion about two main things. The first one being the globalization of Indian content, as to how we can better cater to the international market. And the second one being the rising influence of the OTT media services within the Indian entertainment industry. Now, this will go on for around 60 minutes, after which we will have we will open the floor to an open Q&A session. Now, before that, I want to take a minute to introduce our organizer for today. LIF, United Kingdom's largest student-led India-centric conference. It has an enduring legacy of serving as an avenue for students to engage with inspiring Indian leaders from across various industries, many years from now. And for today, our panelists are the following people: Mr. Gaurav Gandhi, the Director and the Country General Manager for Amazon Prime Video India.
Hi, everyone.
Then we have Ajit Andhare, the CEO of Viacom 18 Studios. And finally, we have Mr. Alok Tandon, the CEO of INOX Leisure. Hi. We're delighted to have such an esteemed and a diverse set of speakers joining us. We thank you all for taking the time out of your very busy schedule and trying to be with us today. Now, today's event will be moderated by Mr. Gaurav Bahirwani, the founder and CEO of 116 Network, and Akshay Rate, who's a film exhibitor and a distributor. Okay, guys. Now, before opening the floor to our moderators and panelists, I would like to make a note of a couple of things. We request all our panelists to keep their responses within 5 minutes to ensure that everyone gets adequate time to voice out their opinions. The audience, of course, can send in their questions throughout the session through the Q&A box that is present in Zoom. Our team will then pick the most relevant questions for those that our panelists would later address to the Q&A session. Now, without further ado, I turn it over to our moderator, Mr. Gaurav and Akshay. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranav. Good afternoon to all who've joined us from the UK, and good evening to our panelists and the others who are joining us from India. I have my co-moderator, Akshay Rati, with me today, and we're looking forward to a very interesting discussion over the next 90 minutes. Although Akshay did point out earlier, while we were just having a conversation, there are 3 Gauravs on the panel, so something seems fishy, but I'll leave that for your imagination. Before we kickstart our discussion, it's important to just take a few moments to reflect on the year that's gone by. Undeniably, I think 2020 was a year that changed the course of human history. I remember January 2020, Australian bushfires were dominating the news headlines, and we could see pictures coming out of Sydney and people wearing masks. And none of us really thought that those pieces of fabric would eventually appear in every city and continent of the world, right? And the humble mask became the emblem for the year, apparently. So it was around the same time, March last year, when I think a number of speakers from India were holding a ticket in their hands, just about to fly to London when the world stopped, right? We had no choice, but we adapted to that new reality. Living rooms turned into offices. I think our morning commute became, very different. It was measured more in meters than miles. Our workplaces fitted neatly into our palms, of our disinfected hands, as I would say. So 2020 did change a lot for us. We lost a lot of lives, and it changed the way we mourned, unfortunately. It changed the world of sports. It changed the royal family in Britain, right? Harry and Meghan announced their new careers in LA. And then most importantly, it changed the way we consumed content, right? So let's be thankful that we've all survived, and unmuted by these circumstances today, we are all here at the opening panel of the LSE India Forum 2021. You can all hug yourselves in silence, and we can just start off the session. Akshay, over to you. You can open the panel for discussion now. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Gaurav. We'll cut the cheese loose and come straight to the point. Alok, we'll, for the convenience, and that's how it works out easily, we'll go by alphabetical order. So we'll make you the opening batsman.
Okay, fine.
Everyone else is G. So that brings us to you. Alok, it's been a tough year, obviously, and movie exhibition has been one sector that's possibly suffered the most. Essentially among the first sectors to shut down, essentially among the last sectors to reopen. And even till now, it's not been a complete opening up. There are various states in India which are still grappling with, achieving complete occupancy permissions,
Right.
and a whole lot more. How's it been dealing with the events of the year? The survival strategy, what's it been like?
Well, you're absolutely right, Akshay, that we were the first to shut down and we were the last to open. And still, there are lots of states in India which have not given us permission to have 100% capacity. Well, let me tell you, for a business which operates on emotions, both on screen and off screen, there couldn't have been a more severe suffering than remaining shut for the audiences for more than 200 days. Well, I would say that screens went dark and the lobbies fell silent. That's how I can put it. Uh, and just to add to it, that never ever in the century-long history of cinemas, the industry has witnessed a shutdown, which has been so long. And the setback has definitely been an unprecedented one. There were zero cash flows which were coming in. There was absolutely silence everywhere. And yes, everybody had to suffer. There was not even a single ray of light on the screens which was coming. Well, let me tell you, things were tough. We had a tough time, but slowly we all are coming out of it. The current situation, if you see, in India is slightly improving. We have resumed operations somewhere in mid-October, and we are witnessing a steady and gradual increase in footfalls, which is happening across our multiplexes. In fact, I'm happy to say that there were a few movies which really had houseful shows. And when I talk about houseful, Akshay, I mean, as per the government protocol, every alternate seat was occupied. So I can name movies like Crack, Red, Solo Down South in India, Tenet, Wonder Woman did amazingly well. And more recently, 3-4 days back, I can talk about movies like Ruhi, Robert, and Jathi Rathalu. So things are bouncing back. You asked me, how did we fare? Well, let me tell you, um, it was tough for us. No revenues at all. We went back to the drawing board to ensure that how do we make the company survive. We made teams to ensure that how do we go through every line item in our P&L and ensure that that is controlled. How do we see that whatever fixed costs we have, how do we reduce it drastically? So whether it was writing letters to a landlord saying that we will not be able to pay you rent, or at the same time writing to the electricity boards, I'm just taking two diverse things, saying that please remove the minimum demand charges from our electricity bills. We did that. We had to see to it that the company survives. And at the same time, Akshay, we had to take some real harsh decisions where our colleagues and friends were concerned. We had to tell them that for no fault of theirs, we would have to let a few of them go. And if things are nice, we will have them back in our fold. So we fought it bravely. It made us aware of all wastages we were doing as a company, and I'm talking about INOX in particular, and how we can control our purse strings and still do well. And I feel that after COVID, the new company we will start, an INOX 2.0, would be radically different from what it was earlier. And it was all because of the measures we took. We knew that the content will take time to come. We knew that even the producers are waiting for 100% capacity and for that fierce psychosis of people to go away. And only then they will come out and release their movies, and rightly so. A person who has invested hundreds of crores of rupees in his content would like to get the maximum out of it. So we respect that decision that yes, they were taking time and are still taking time to come out with their movies. We are happy that in the last couple of days, a few big marquee movies, the dates have been announced, but they took some time. So I would say that things have been challenging, but today I can surely say that we have literally overcome those dark days and moving towards an area where we all will be able to do well. Cinemas are not going anywhere. Let me tell you this. Cinemas are not going anywhere. They are here to stay. And especially in India, Akshay, where this is one of the cheapest form of entertainments we Indians have. For us Indians, going out for a movie on a weekend, going out to eat food is the main thing we have as a source of entertainment, because we as a race, we are not an outdoor race. We don't go hunting, we don't go trekking, we don't go biking. For us, what's enjoyment is to spend time with family and friends in an environment where we see things on a large screen. We see our idols over there. and view it as a communal viewing that we all love to see our stars on the giant screen, and enjoy and see that what they are doing. So this is how I would say that the pandemic has been for us, but going forward, things will surely change, and I'm quite optimistic about it.
Thank you, Alok. Lovely insights. Over to you, Gaurav, to take it forward.
Let me just follow on. Thanks, Alok, for the insights. Let me just shift on to the digital side now. Consumer spending patterns did, turn upside down, during the pandemic. We've seen some industries just flourish, but most of them have sort of suffered.
Right.
And a significant currency that changed was the attention of people, right? In particular, fundamentally, pandemic has changed the way we consume video content.
Sure.
So there's no doubt that the OTT streaming market grew phenomenally over the last 12 months. Let me ask you this, Gaurav Gandhi. When the lockdown kicked in, say, March 2020, I believe OTT platforms like yourselves were perhaps not fully ready to imagine what the following months would bring on in terms of demand, right? And when I say demand, in terms of both subscriptions and the content itself. So I think initially people were watching their favorite content on repeat mode, clearly because there was this urgent need to sort of push in new content. India was locked, shooting was stalled, perhaps a lot of projects were in post-production stage. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think till June 2020, there was a lull with new content coming out. I've got two parts to my question. One is, how did you tackle the situation internally, bringing changes to the way you operate your business? And secondly, how did you manage to hold back your existing customers, or subscribers rather, from possibly having an affair with, let's say, your competitors at that point?
Hey, thank you, Gaurav. I think it's important before we get to the stage of what happened during the pandemic to see, what the sector has been doing over the last few years and the tailwinds that the OTT or the digital video streaming space has seen in India. At a very high level, the fact is we have a young demographic in the country who's increasingly moving to on-demand content. If you then look at ubiquitous mobile phones that become the screen of choice, especially in a single TV home market like India, where 95% homes have one television. This is the TV in the house for many and their screen. And then you add that to the cheapest data in the world, add that to great content and some great work across the board by creators, and the fact that disposable incomes have been growing and people want pay for experiences. So all of that was already in the play, and we saw great momentum coming. That when it came to March last year, a year back, a bunch of things happened. Now obviously people had more time. They had more time at home. They had more. They suddenly had to look at choices, and many choices were disrupted. So Alok talked about the fact that cinemas were shut. Television, went on repeats because production was such. So we suddenly had a lot of eyeballs, a lot of interest, and we are very fortunate as Prime Video. One, for the fact that we have obviously a large global slate of programming, Indian and international, but we also were very fortunate to have a lot of our shows and originals, in play at that time to come on the service. So whether it was the FOMO Short Sex Season or Patal Lok or Breathe or Bandish Band-Aids, and then eventually later Mirzapur and so on, we had a lot of these shows which were there for customers to entertain them. We also then worked with creators to say, hey, obviously there was the cinema which was impacted, but there were a bunch of films that our audiences were really looking forward to watching. And so we worked with the creators and producers to find a way to get these movies to audiences in India and around the world straight through streaming. So from middle of last year to early this year, we've got 20 movies across 5 languages straight to streaming. So that became a very interesting way for us to get the content they were looking forward to, for our customers. And these range from, we started with Gulabo Sutabo and Shakuntala Devi and Sururai Potru and recently Drishyam and earlier Kuli Number One and many, many more. So we were able to do that. And that sort of, and I'll talk about how that really changed the way the new distribution format erupted and came out and what it did for the creators. So that was the other one. We also obviously are fortunate to have a global pipeline of content. So whether it was the season 2 of Boys or many others, and then of course great international licensed content from movies like Joker and many, many more. So I think because of all the global content, local Indian originals, plus licensed content and direct to service movies, we were able to actually get a really strong slate for our customers to really enjoy. And I think we've been very fortunate to be able to do that in this time. So I'll take a pause there for any follow-up that you may have, and I can go through some more details.
Yeah. Okay. Akshay, you want to continue, and then I'll come back to Gaurav as well.
Sure. So, I mean, Gaurav just spoke about, the exciting times that are in store for content creators. So let's move to a content creator, the other Gaurav, Verma. Gaurav, Red Chillies Entertainment, which is the company that you represent and produce content with, has had an exciting time over the last 1 year, creating a lot of content for the theatrical format and for the streaming platforms. You've been flirting with both the avenues, and very successfully so. Extremely exciting times, without a doubt, for content creators. But how do you go about making a choice about which story deserves to go or can be optimally told on which platform? Do you want to speak about that?
So we don't actually put them in buckets to start with. I think we have films and we have series. Films are not necessarily divided into theatrical or OTT now. I think for us, everything is theatrical. We would like to attempt that. And if there is a certain film which maybe can travel more on streaming and probably has legs beyond the constitution, beyond the territory that we largely are catering to, I think we may opt for digital. I think it will be more from a reach point of view rather than from a sale. I think we are willing to wait. I think there's certain things that we're waiting with for theatrical to probably gear up. I think hopefully with this last Friday we have seen that. I think hopefully start gearing up with big films coming up in April and May. I think it should be back to at least, if not 100%, maybe to 75% to 60% of pre-COVID. I think then we should be home. I think, yeah. So we are not kind of breaking them now. I think last year, if you say, Gaurav and I think Alok and Ajit might agree on this, the production stopped. I think it's just not for cinemas, it's for everyone. And there's a certain amount of content which everyone promises on a service, whether it's cinemas, whether it's streaming, whether it's television. Unfortunately, television didn't do that much buying, but the only option which was to take the content to consumers was streaming. And that's why producers took that route. And that may continue in future or not. I think that's probably we can discuss that part. But I think everyone will chase theatrical. I think theatrical is something that we all want to survive. I think there is definitely a pressure from streaming on theatrical. It's breathing. The windows are shrinking. It has shrunk over the last 3-4 years. It is shrinking again. I think that's the discussion and debate we will continue to have over a period of time. But yes, we will, I think for us, we will continue to back theatrical and probably focus on theatrical. For long format, which is series, I think we now have the flexibility not to shrink those stories into 2 hours or 2.5 hours. We can probably invest in more characters and we can look at telling those stories through series, which can be 6, 7, or 8 episodes. I think that's what the advantage is. And consumers are also consuming it like a film. I think probably 2 films, which are basically binge watching 3 episodes and 4 episodes simultaneously and finishing off a season, which was a rarity before. So that's the advantage. That's where we'll focus on digital. Films continues to be theatrical. But coming to the earlier point, which was made on content consumption, I think Gaurav made a point on how consumers are consuming content on handheld devices largely. But the good part is, overall the good part is, the more, I think 2 years back or 1 year back, we didn't see this much of content being consumed. We were caught to, within the 4 walls of a household, we have started consuming more content. So average consumption by today on music and streaming is up. That means more content is being consumed. It's about now inviting people out and taking them to different platforms, be it streaming, be it television, be it TV, or be it cinemas. So I think in a way, in terms of habit, it's a phenomenal growth in the habit of consumption of entertainment. Question will be, how many can we invite outside and take them to cinemas so that all streams can equally benefit from that change?
Just continue from what you said, Gaurav. Sorry, Akshay.
So, I was going to take it back to you. Go for it.
So just continuing on the content bit, Ajit, I think this is where I think I'd like your viewpoint on this. From Viacom's perspective, as a studio, you guys have given us very, very interesting and meaningful cinema over the years. I know you have your alliance with Paramount Pictures as well. You've got us those to watch here in India. But I realized that in 2018, you stepped into the digital content space with Tipping Point, right? And you also have your own platform, which is Woot. Jamtar was probably one of the best contents that we've seen coming out from your side. So as a major studio, normally, big budget films usually take priority, and you deeply rely on the box office revenues to sort of recover your cost and, make profits there. But given what's changed in the last 1 year, do you feel that content development priorities would change now? Would you start focusing more on mid-budget films or original content where the cost can be recovered quickly? And you distribute them through probably platforms like the Amazon and the Netflix of the world? Sorry, you'll just have to unmute yourself, Ajit. Sorry. Yeah.
I think that's what happens when you listen for a long time. Go on mute automatically. I think that's what has happened with the business as well. It got muted on one side, which is in the theaters. And I think the question that you ask is, for a large studio, does that change the priorities and specifically given our kind of experience? So I think the answer really lies in, studio is a very broad word. And I think traditionally studio model bases itself on a volume play and on the strength of bringing two things to the party. One is, of course, capital for content, especially high risk content. And second is the ability to distribute it very widely. And I think if those are the two things that you sort of play an emphasis on, then of course your reliance on the a big ticket tent pole and so on and so forth tends to take a precedence. So their observation is absolutely correct. But that's a very traditional studio. And I think increasingly with the OTTs also in the run to provide both, in some cases, the capital for risky content making, and phenomenal ability to distribute it much, much wider than any physical form of distribution are clearly in a pole position, So this is a storm in which some of us were in boats, some more traditional players were in boats with holes, and these guys were actually on cruise ships, So they've, of course, had a great advantage of how things have come around. And I think that's the reason that they're actually taking the best advantage of this situation, which is they're not only coming out with new formats, breaking formats, and so on and so forth on the content side, but they're also going to some of the traditional content and trying to put it on their platform, which makes complete sense. For someone like us, however, the journey has been very different because we've actually not been in that sense a traditional studio. And we've always lent a lot more towards content creation. And we've defined ourselves more as a content creator rather than essentially a distributor or a capital provider, which is the traditional DNA. And for us, therefore, Tipping Point, which is our digital arm, which really is an outlet to our content creation ability for the digital format, sort of preceded this entire COVID situation. And in a sense, we were somewhere between the boat with the water and the cruise ship. So we were able to look after a certain part of our business where Tipping Point, of course, thrived, and some of our best content has come in this time. And I think in the next month itself, 3 more series will be out on some other major platforms. But yes, of course, the theatrical side is where we saw how tough it became. And I think the first challenge was simply resumption of supply side, which impacted almost everyone, whether you were in TV production, film, or series. But as Akshay pointed out, that while supply resumed at around the first half of the year, the demand resumption in the most physical format of consumption, which is theater, is a problem which is yet to be fully solved. So I think it depends on your vantage point. If you look at yourself as a content creator, I think OTT is hugely empowering because it fundamentally attacks distribution. When I have distributed my biggest film, made my biggest film, Padmavat, it went into 80 countries, and we were very proud to say that, look, we took this to 80 countries. But that little series called Jamtara opened in 200 countries. So I think that just lays out the landscape. The sheer solution that OTT provides in terms of distribution is simply going to far outweigh, and with the things that Gaurav outlined, the explosion of the smartphones, data pricing, I mean, the party is just too heavily skewed towards Gaurav, on the right platform. And I think, therefore, for all of us, it's really about defining what you are and which position you want to take. If you are going to be a very traditional studio-driven business, I think there are going to be many challenges on you because there are many contenders now to play that role. But if you fancy yourself as a creator and you have the ability to pivot your product and you are addressing your consumer, you will actually be quite the opposite, excited that look, OTT is providing you avenues of not only so many open formats of storytelling, which you can't tell in traditional cinema, but also providing you a great width of distribution. So it's really about where you sit in this puzzle and you sit in the mix as to how it impacts you.
Thank you, Ajit. Thank you. That was lovely insight.
Akshay? If you, sorry,
yes.
if you guys allow, I just had to dimensionalize one point Ajit was making to give more context on the distribution and reach for the audience, really. So Ajit talks about the 200 countries, territories, release compared to what a film would release, which was, a few dozen, or what the case may be. But I think it's important to also see that in context of even domestic. The fact is today Prime Video, for example, is watched in over 4,300 towns and cities in the country. It goes that deep. And when a movie releases or a bunch of movies release, they're watched in over 4,000 cities and towns. Now that reach is enormous for a film. I'll give you one more dimension. When we got our direct-to-service films from local languages, Malayalam, Kannada, Marathi, Malayalam, Kannada, Tamil, Telugu, and when they were released on the service, within a few weeks, we realized 50% of our audience base for those movies were outside their home states. So what that does is really give creators an option to be able to get their content far and wide domestically and internationally. So I want to dimensionalize Ajit's point about reach to give audience more context.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaurav.
Right. Coming back to you, Alok, obviously, with the events that we've witnessed over the last 1 year, where the landscape of the entertainment sector has changed, it's important even for the exhibition sector to pivot and make some innovations to pave the way forward. You want to speak about how you see the exhibition sector tweaking and pivoting to make sure that its survival, or rather its ability to thrive in the future, is sustained.
Okay, so actually, let me tell you, as I said, that cinema and exhibition sector will survive and thrive also. There are no two ways about it. But yes, at the same time, a time has come when we have to pamper our guests. We have to ensure that they come out, we decouch them so that they can come out and watch a movie on a giant screen. So what we've done in the last couple of years, I would say, and yes, because of COVID also, it's become slightly accelerated. Number one, we have looked at marketing of movies in a different way. For example, private screening. Now, these things were unheard of in India earlier, but now because of the advent of COVID, we said, let's promote private screening. Let's ensure that when a person or a family, he comes and watches a movie, he watches with his close friends and relatives, and he feels safe in that entire scenario where he is in. Because remember, as I earlier said, that fear psychosis as of now has not gone, and neither it will go so easily. So things will be looked at differently. And today, just to sidetrack and talk about the marketing, today I don't want to market any movie which talks about the stars or the actors over there. I have to market it in such a way that you come to a cinema hall and you'll have a safe and a hygiene environment. So the marketing strategy has totally changed for a movie. So coming back to your question, Akshay, that what else we can do, I can also say is that we today are ensuring that there's more technology, that if a person or a guest wants to see a movie in different formats, he's able to see that. Whether it's an MX4D, whether it's with LED projection, whether it's an Insignia, which is the luxury theaters, whether it's an IMAX, whether it is with ScreenX, which is where you see a movie on the side walls also. So it's nothing but having new technology and new ways of watching a movie. For example, if Ajit or Gaurav, Verma, when they come out with a movie, I would like to sell to one guy more tickets than he would have seen it in a 2D. I would like him to watch a movie in ScreenX also and an LED projection also, so that the same content is consumed in more ways than one. So that's how I think that the entire strategy has changed. Today, we are, I would say, spending a lot where luxury is concerned. We are literally spending a lot where service is concerned, because when a guest comes out, he would like to watch a movie in an atmosphere which is luxurious, where he gets great service, where he gets great food, or whatever he wants is there with him. So what we say that we want to offer a 2.5-hour vacation to our guests. It's something where we would like to literally make him spend, if I can use that word, in a cinema hall for tickets, for food, and for the entire experience which is getting in the exhibition sector. And that, Akshay, is a change which is happening. Earlier, you used to watch a movie only in one format. Today, we are saying there are multiple formats. There are different ways of being served. There are different levels of luxury. It depends on which hall you want to go to and watch the same content. So these are the changes today where cinema exhibitors are making, and that will continue happening. We will continue doing the best to pull a patron from his house and bring him to the cinema halls.
Thank you, Alok. On that note, I'd like to come to Gaurav Verma. Obviously, with these new formats coming into play and expanding in terms of the count of them in the exhibition sector, it also demands a tweak in the way we make our movies. I think, if you look at the larger number of movies that have been very successful since the boom of the OTT platforms, there have been a lot of big screen spectacles, immersive viewing experiences that have done phenomenally well. Is that the way forward, or are we still going to be looking at niche, more intimate storytelling coming to the big screen, or is it going ahead the era of spectacles?
I think it's a mix of both. You can't just rely or continue to serve one format because that format will die. I think you can have the Marvel superheroes, but Disney continues to churn out animation, which they've been doing it for the last 70 years. So how do you deny one? And how do you basically, the one is going to not replace the following one or the either way. So but also coming back to formats, see, I feel formats are limited to, when it comes to what Alok was saying in terms of offering, they're limited to largely probably 3% or 4% of exhibition chains. I think not even exhibition chains. If you put like 1,000 screens, we have probably 3% or 4% of that, not beyond that. But the way we see cinema, we see theatrical, I think it's going to be experience, be it spectacle, beats about experience film, beats about a character film, or beats about slice of life stories. I think it's the experience of you stepping out, going to a going to a cinema hall with your dear ones, your friends, and watching a film. I think it's unmatched. At the same point of time, I think the ease of watching, which I think Gaurav Gandhi represents on fingertips, is threatening that ease. So I think both will exist. Likewise, you will have big tentpole films which will continue to spend more and more. I think if you see last 2 years of this year, maybe 2021 and going forward, the average budget for a big film has multiplied tenfold or threefold or fivefold. We're spending more on production, not just on actor fees, not just on technical fees. I think a lot of money is going there. So that money is also going for experience. That film has to be seen in a certain way. So that encourages it. But at the same point of time, you will have these lovely stories which will continue to attract. I mean, we can discuss about Andhadhun, we can discuss about Badla. These are also working in 15 or 16 cities, but does that make them niche? But they're still driving 100 crores gross box office in India. So are they niche or are they mass? I think I would still put them in a wider category that they are still driving people to box office. So there'll be all sort of categories, but yeah, I think if question is whether we'll make films which will travel beyond cities, which Gaurav Gandhi is saying is 4,300. We want to make those films which will travel to 4,300 cities and towns, and I think that's what we would like to do. But we'll continue to make smaller films which will appear on cinemas as well as on digital.
Right. Back at you, Gaurav.
Thank you. So I just want to come back to you, Gaurav, and just want to understand a couple of things. So this whole debate on when theater is going to come back. Alok had a point of view, and I think I personally agree that it's not going anywhere. Theater is going to come back with full swing, and people are sort of going to rush into this much needed change that we all need. But what I want to understand is that while India is clocking this double-digit growth in the OTT subscriptions, sustainability is going to be very critical, right? So do you feel that as life comes back to normal, the demand for OTT platforms that we are witnessing could taper? Is that a possibility? And if there is a possibility, what kind of innovations do you think that the OTT platforms would need to make to hold up the momentum?
Thanks. I think first of all, I think I would say that we are at a very early stage of the OTT or streaming revolution in general. Prime Video has been there for over 4 years, but I'm just saying overall, it's really the early stage. Where we sit from today, if you look 4 to 5 years out, I think there'll be as many people streaming content on a device of their choice as watching TV. So to that end, I think, the market segment size is very, very large for one to look at. So that's a sizing of point of people to get to. The other important thing to look at is that OTT does something to content or television the same way that multiplex did to single screens. When you actually got to multiplexes, you were able to you don't have the pressure to build get a film to fill 1,000 seats in a theater, right? So you could then make segmented cinema. From Dil Chahta Hai to Gully Boy, you have segmented cinema, and large to Gaurav Verma's point, it's not like small. They're large. Badla he mentioned, also another as Ajit and his team have done. So I think the segmentation that you saw was a function of a new economic model that came out because of the plexes. Similarly, for streaming is doing to TV in many ways what the TV economic model could not do, because you were bound to create the lowest common denominator programming in a manner because you had one model which was more advertising driven or ratings driven, and nothing wrong or right about it, just that that's the model, right? So you worked in a particular format. With streaming, you actually can segment, and you are segmenting. So think about it like hundreds of millions of users, and then there are many segments of customers, and you super serve that segment of customers who are then ready to pay for that content or watch it with ads, as the case may be. And the interesting point, as people have been talking about, is there's a space for cinema and streaming, and I agree there's a space for both. In fact, India is one market where it's an and market, not an or market. Like there are AVOD and SVOD, and there is cinema and TV and streaming and so on. There's an opportunity to grow across, and the pace of growth may be different. Like that's not the point here. The point really is so to your third point about viability and investment and what people are doing. I think people are doing different things. To our point of view, like we follow it in a very simple 5 or 6 ways to look at this, and how do we program for the country, how do we market for India. First is we are a local service in our minds. Like we are super local. We program in 9 local languages and English, so 10. When we talk about local, we are local. Our UIs are local. We have Hindi, Tamil, Telugu UIs for customers to watch. Then it's about content. Ultimately, people are coming to watch great content, and it's about creating local stories. It's about creating essentially Indian stories that people connect with, and then diversity of the countries to be factored in, and taste and preferences. Then we looked at and of course, and you have to be a home for talent, and you want to work with the best creators, you want to work with the best talent, and so on. This next opportunity we identified was that we talk about cinemas here, but the fact is, in a country as large as ours, which makes so many movies, 2,000 or something like that in a year, we have 9,500 screens. Our screen density is amongst the lowest in the world. So in that, how do we play a role? We play a role of adding screens to customers to be able to watch those films. The biggest films in India are consumed by 2% people in theaters. The biggest films. Like, how could we add to that audience base? I talked about it really briefly. So we add that, bring global content to India, we bring Indian content globally. Now 1 in 5 viewers of our Indian originals are outside of India. How do we create that as well? And then, of course, ultimately, when you take this, you have to focus on the basics. Have the maximum distribution. Make sure you're available everywhere. When you market, you have to basically tap the cultural zeitgeist. So all of those things, and ultimately, when you bring all this together, and from our point of view, we also have the larger Prime program, which we are part of, which makes it great for customers across multiple benefits. We believe that we are just getting started in terms of tapping on this large market, but also in many ways creating a new segment with our content and users, and giving customers experiences they haven't had in the past. Yeah. So I really think there's a lot of headroom, Gaurav, to grow for us and for everybody else.
Just to add on, I just saw that there's been a lot of traction with kids related content. Is that something that Amazon sort of also focuses on, to create content for kids? Is that a generation that you sort of want to tap in?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have content for kids customers, for kids as well. If you look at our profiles, customers can actually choose the profile for kids. You have a section. So of course, from our point of view, we entertain audiences across and the families across. And to the point about, interestingly, is that while mobile has been is the largest segment in India, we've also seen, very interestingly, living room consumption growing over the last couple of years. And particularly last 1.5 years, as affordable smart TVs have come in, as streaming sticks have becoming more popular, and that allows customers to be able to watch, especially kids, to be able to watch that content at home on large screens as well, because the phones are not always theirs, but the TV screens, they can use that. So I think we're seeing that as well, and that's an important area for us too. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you. Yes, Akshay.
Coming back to you, Gaurav, very interesting point by Gaurav Gandhi here about catering to kids. If you look at one of the general practices in India, a huge chunk of the content that we make, especially for the theatrical format, possibly 95-96% of it, if not more, is largely directed towards the youth or the population that's 18 and above. Are we doing enough in terms of creating original content in India? Yes, animation is a small niche in India, but in terms of live action films, in terms of the big screen spectacles, in terms of the entertainment creation at large, are we doing enough to captivate the audience that's going to be the paying consumer of tomorrow? And if so, if not, what do you think is the way to get them on board for Indian content?
See, in India, kids do watch films which are kind of universal. It's not that they are limited to or defined by an age group. I think they continue to watch, like most of the young stars, they're immensely popular. I think look at the kind of content, look at the kind of brands they're promoting. They're largely catering to kids. So like a Varun, who's immensely popular, like his Tiger Shroff, like his Karthik, they're immensely popular, but they've not done a film which is supposed to cater to a probably 3 to 8 or 3 to 11, if that's the age group that you're chasing. So there's a difference in animation. Animation tail is very longer internationally. Animation films don't make necessarily money on theatrical. They largely make money after theatrical, which is not the case in India. We are not yet there. I think we need characters. We need to develop those characters over a period of time. And everywhere across the world, you see, rarely there is a character which has come in last 10 years. These characters existed for some time, and everyone is bringing them back. I think the only thing which I remember is probably Kung Fu Panda is the only character which came like in last 15 years. Like Spider-Man has been around. Marvel has been around. You've got all the Disney characters have been around for some time. So for animation, I think the key is to have a character and not just rely on films, have following across the board. That helps. But in India, if you say that we are not catering to, coming back to your question on catering or not catering to, I think probably a certain age group, I think films are catering to everyone. We do not make extremely violent films. Most of the films that we make are PG or 15, under 15, which a parental guidance is enough. And they are enjoying the music as well as the film. So we are there. One point which I wanted to come back, probably add to Gaurav's point in terms of the reach. See, what's happening is, I think the question will be, our theatrical is dependent on 15 cities. They have enough cinemas. So if someone says we don't have enough cinemas, we have cinemas where the money is actually. So Bombay is overcrowded, Delhi is overcrowded, so is Bangalore, so is Hyderabad. I think excluding Chennai, every city is overcrowded. I think Alok will probably second that. That's where the money is coming from. The question comes, what happens to the rest of them? Where probably a tier 2 or tier 3 or tier 4. Because if you look at the state of Uttar Pradesh, the population is sizable, which is 18 crores, Hindi speaking. But how many cinemas do you have? Probably, if you exclude Noida and Ghaziabad, probably 140, 150 odd multiplexes. Same goes for Bihar, Hindi speaking population. Same goes for Odisha, same goes for Bengal. So not Bengal, Bengal is mostly Bengali, but you dependent on one particular city to get collections. So question will be, if the consumption which is happening on theatrical is it same as on digital, which is basically relying on those 15, 60 top cities where you have penetration, where you have affordability, where you have people can buy streaming, because streaming is not cheap, though we have cheapest data, but to watch 2.5 hours of content across the month, it's not cheap anymore. So if we can go beyond that, I think then entertainment is traveling. That has always been the test, whether it's theatrical, that has always been the test, whether it's television. I think so. Let's see. I think if that happens, I think probably Alok will also invest more into these markets and come up with more multiplexes, hopefully.
Back to you, Gaurav.
Thank you. Ajit, I actually, just coming back to you, I actually read a report recently which surprised me. It actually said that there are more internet users in tier 2 and tier 3 cities than in the urban markets now. So, so we spoke about it when we started this conversation, that with the lowest per gigabit data cost in the world, and the demand for content is obviously skyrocketing. With the changing demographics that we see, customer centricity in content creation seems to be becoming important, right, at this stage. How does that affect your content strategy? And perhaps Gaurav Gandhi, you could also throw some light from a platform's perspective, how customer centricity is actually being viewed at this stage.
I think the biggest change that has happened is actually in being able to address this customer centricity in a completely new way. So if you see the traditional modes, which I think Gaurav also talked about, whether it was television, the way it's happened in India, or it's been cinema, it's essentially been mass entertainment packaged in more or less standard formats and really sort of squeezing them as much as you can, which is why even if you look at some of our most celebrated stars and films, they all fit into a very strong sort of archetype. So you have an angry young man who will deliver 25 hits, and you have a romantic star who will deliver so I think the whole entertainment format fundamentally was monochromatic because of the constraint on distribution, because you're only distributing it through these two boxes. And I think you just could not address consumer in any other manner. I think the biggest change is now you're not addressing one single mass. You are actually addressing many cohorts. So your answer to success is not simply one universal story, which will be that one mega hit like a Bahubali or like any other big film which kind of touches everyone and compels everyone, which is really the holy grail of storytelling, but you can't get it every time. A much easier way and a much more exciting way, or at least if I don't say more exciting, a more enabling way is, instead of finding that highest common factor, you actually address small cohorts of consumers where your customer centricity itself has become now not one but multiple. So you have various segments, your various cohorts, and each of them, they respond to a certain kind of storytelling, and you can cater to only those. And I think this is very exciting from a format point of view, because it places you in the unique position of having that unique access to data, which can allow you to define these cohorts that you're working with, and therefore tailor your programming strategy and take bold calls for content which others might not be able to even appreciate and see, because they do not have that access to that data. That's one. And from a content creator point of view, it actually frees you up from this sort of tyranny of trying to please all and make something which everybody will only cater to, because for a storyteller, the excitement is actually in exploring different ideas. And I think that's the big change that has happened, both when the Plexus came, and as Gaurav was saying, also when OTTs have come, because I can now choose to tell stories which actually don't respect the formats which have been used at all before. I can break formats. The very fact that I don't need to be restricted to a 2 hour actually frees up the whole constraint of screenplay so much, because the biggest constraint of screenplay is that whatever your story be, whether it's about 10 years, 2 months, or 15 hours, you got to condense it in 75 to 80 scenes, which are not more than 2.5 hours. That is a massive constraint. And the moment you go to a series format, you have complex character graphs that you can play with. You don't need to just deal with one protagonist. You could have several graphs. You could take it into 10 episodes. You could actually say, okay, enough and more, done here in season 1. I'll address this in season 2. It's like a candy shop. It's a very exciting place, So customer centricity, if it was like one Arjun who had to, put that whole arrow into the eye of one machli to get that panchali, here suddenly you've got 50 billions of machlis where you just decide which one you want to hit, and you can do interesting things. So it's a very exciting place, from customer centricity as well as a creative point.
Thank you, Ajit. Gaurav Gandhi, you want to react to this?
Yeah, I totally agree with Ajit. I think it's fascinating, and I think I can give you some examples to actually to Ajit's points. So to super serve that segment of customers, if you are able to look at and identify that and understand what the customer wants and able to deliver that well, I can give you 2 or 3 good examples. Like Bandish Bandits would not be people would not think of it as a show that, hey, OTT will bring, but when we bring that show and entertains customers, bring the world of classical music and modern pop music into one, and how that resonates with audience segments across ages for different reasons. So it's a show which goes broad, but touches different customers for different reasons, is one example. Another good example would be, in my view, would be, tapping on to this whole thing about sports docus. And I talked about, the test, which we did really well for us globally in Australia and so on. But we did a one with Kabaddi recently, Sons of Soil, and how that takes a view of a sport, but gives the human factors to it, elements to a team that has not performed as well, and what their trials and tribulations were and how they reacted to it. So I think those are good examples of it. And then you're able to, to Ajit's point about, characters, I think it's also important to see how those characters live in customers' lives, even beyond the moments that they're watching those 10 hours or 8 hours or 6 hours. So Hathiram from Patal lives in your life, much longer, or Tamanna from Bandish Bandit lives like, or Kalim Bhaiya for that matter from Mirzapur. So I think customer centricity comes in many, many ways. It comes in understanding your audience and then going after and serving them with the right thing. And then sometimes identifying latent needs which customers don't articulate well enough, and then you're able to tap onto them. So
if I can just add to it, if I can just butt in and say that, Gaurav, you're absolutely right that earlier when you said that it's not either or, it's and. It's theaters and it's OTT. And I totally agree with Ajit when he said that the creativity today of the content creator has been unleashed, because there are more platforms, there are more ways of showing your content on different platforms. And today, if you see in the last 3-4 years, how creativity has improved. And Gaurav, I am with you that I, as a consumer, also spend a lot of time in watching movies and also watching web series, because you've invested in the character. I have invested in Kaleen Bhaiya, I have invested in Guy Tonde, and I want to see what happens after that. And true, Ajit said that they have to compress everything in 80 or 90 frames, which I say is always there, because cinemas are watching it. You're watching a movie on a large screen, you're watching yourself on a giant screen. Even the talent, I think, wants to be appreciated, and all the whistles and talis which we have in India is there on a large screen. But at the same time, new creativity has come in, a new way of storytelling has come in. We have got a new breed of actors, directors, people who have really unleashed and done whatever they could. So it's a matter of not cinema or theater or OTT, but both, and both will survive. And I don't know whether you guys know or not, but there was a study done by EY for a National Association of Theatre Owners in America. And what they said is that the content, a viewer always keeps on seeing more content. For example, if I'm a lover of movies, I will ensure that I spend an equal time on OTT. And when I'm through with my quota of OTT, I go back to the movie. So it's not either or, it's both and. And the time spent on viewing is more, but at the same time, one section has not cut away the pie from the other. It's both are coexisting, and that will happen in the future. That's what my take of the entire thing is.
Right. Alok, let me just pick it up from there and throw a question at you and Gaurav Verma. I'd like both of you to address this. As much as we are evolving with the way we tell our tales, one entity that is essentially chased, whether it's by theaters or by the OTT platforms, to get the big numbers, whether it's in terms of ticket sales or subscriptions, is our stars. Do you think there's a role that the theatrical format, or the fact that a ticket is bought to view that, that content once for that star, do you think the halo of theatrical plays a role in building these stars?
Well, today, let me tell you, a star is the content. Today, content is everything. Today's audience has become very discerning, Akshay. They will go and see a superstar maybe on a Friday or on a Saturday, but from a Sunday onwards, if the content is not good, nobody will come inside the auditorium. So answering the question, I'm buying a ticket, yes, first to see a star, but then what's predominantly important for me is the content which I'm going to see. That's important. So I would say that things have changed in the last 3 to 4 years. We have got some people who have done amazingly well, who were not even talked about, but today they are as big as the superstars we have in our country. There are movies which Ajit said that started small, but then have done fantastic. Sui Dhaga, one of them. If I can talk about Uri, I can talk about Tandon, which Ajit talked about. So these are movies which people have liked the story. And going forward, star will be one attraction. but the biggest attraction would be how the story is being told.
Gaurav, your take on that?
See, it's like sports. You need a superstar to expand, the following, the followers, the reach of the game. Superstars in business are like that. I mean, look at every superstar. They have added territories after territories, viewers after viewers to this business. To discount them, it's impossible. I mean, Gaurav Gandhi will tell you, you need a clickbait. Clickbait will only work if there's a familiar face or a popular face. The format works like this. And for everyone, I mean, today, the expansion of Indian films and international, there's a face attached to it. Within India, the expansion of theatrical, there's a face attached to it. And that's the reason when Alok sets up a cinema and probably wants to announce it, he needs a face around it. He will not chase someone who's not a face on it. So faces are important. What happens is likability of these faces makes your content travel wider, not just on theatrical, but on digital as well as on television, not just domestically, but internationally as well. So faces are important. So coming back to your question of whether theaters have made stars, I think it works both ways. I think slowly and gradually, the actors who are coming in smaller films become stars by the kind of performance they do. They're liked by audience, they bring more people to cinemas, and that's what continues to happen. We have seen the decade of 90s where exhibition, the footfalls have grown. Last decade, the footfalls have not grown that much. I think actors will play a part, but not just content or not just stars. It has to mix of both.
Very, very interesting insights. Back to you, Gaurav.
Yeah. My next question, I think, is just open to all the panelists. We've spoken about, obviously, theaters. We've spoken about the OTT. We understand that both will exist in their own space because they both have their own importance. There's been a current trend of digital premieres, and Gaurav Gandhi would probably speak a little more about that for us. Then there has been Jio's promise of first day first show, which happened by Mr. Ambani, I think in 2019, and then there's the reopening of the theaters now. How's the market shaping up? Because I read that Warner Brothers for the 2021 slate, they're actually doing a combination of theaters as well as the HBO that they have. They're going to release it, the content on both the platforms. Is a hybrid model possible in India?
Who's the question for?
Well,
I'm open to all the panelists. I think all four of you can probably react to this.
Well, hybrid may take some time, Gaurav, for in India to be successful. Remember, Warner is doing it for not all their movies, for some of their movies, and that too only for a short period of time because of COVID. See, today, cinemas are not doing well, not because we don't attract people, but because of various other things where people are not coming. It's because of COVID, there's no content being released. So that's the reason. Today, I would say, if you say that going forward, you'll see a release on an OTT platform as well as on the same day in the cinema hall, that's too futuristic. That's my personal view. Ajit, Gaurav, and Gaurav Verma may have some different views on that, but I don't think it'll happen very soon in India. See, remember one thing. Today, we as cinema exhibitors have invested a lot in our property. And in the last couple of years, the entire way we show movies has changed. I don't think that any operator would like the same content to be shown the same day to a certain set of audiences who could have come to a cinema to watch it, but is today watching it from the environments of his own house. It's something where if you say that the same thing is happening in restaurants also, that you order on Zomato or Swiggy, at the same time you can go to a restaurant. But remember, the revenue and whatever it is coming to that particular restaurant which is there. Here, though we have invested in the theatrical experience, I am not getting that patron coming in and he's getting it from he's watching it in his own house. Now, let me take a step forward and Ajit and Gaurav Verma can correct me if they feel like. Today, the maximum revenue which comes to a producer is from theatrical viewing. Studies show 60 to 65% comes from theatrical viewing, but there's also another thing, the upside of that particular revenue. So today, when you stream it on a different platform, your upside is limited. But when you continue showing it in a cinema hall, the upside is absolutely infinite. We have seen the upsides of movies like Andhadhun, I said, we have seen upsides of movies like Bahubali, like Dangal, like Uri. So these are things which the upsides have been there because the movies have been shown on theater and on the large screen. So I think that in India today, it's a couple of years away that we have a day-date release. Warner Brothers is just trying it. I think during pandemic, lots of people have tried everything just to survive at that moment of time. But let's see what happens, because technology changes, viewing habits change. But I think that going out of we as Indians or even across the world, that will continue. And people would be going out to consume entertainment in a different way on a large screen with hundreds of sounds and with crystal clear images. So that will continue.
Gandhi, I'll take your view in a minute. Ajit and Gaurav Verma, do you want to react to this? You are the creators. So.
I think another point which I want to add to Alok's point of one is simply revenue contribution to the kitty as a producer or content maker, which we are saying that he pointed out it's 60-65% from box office. I think to me, there is one more dimension to it. And that's really about per capita realization of content, and I think that is where theatrical revenue is very important, because not only it's a significant contributor, an overall fraction of the pie, but if you see per capita, a consumer is going out, spending the amount of money for one show, in addition spending on other consumption, food and all, so on and so forth. I think the value that a content is able to extract from a paying consumer, I think it is unrivaled in theater as compared to any other medium, and why so? Because every time you are able to extract value from consumer, there must be a counter explanation for what is the consumer getting. And the answer lies in, and I don't think we have possibly spoken about it enough, is the unique experience in a theater. I think cinema in a dark room and on a large screen format provides you an experience which is first of all out of home. So, today in pandemic, we're all dying to be out of home, whether it's about eating, whether it's about holidaying, or whether it's about even entertainment consumption. So I think the first thing, it's about out of home, and B, it's a larger than life experience. It's a communal experience, and yet it's a solitary experience because you are in a dark room. All of this actually provides something which is not replicable by the technology of either television or a mobile device, which actually offers something completely on another dimension. It offers you convenience. It offers you the ability to not go anywhere, and content reaches you. So I think each of these media are offering something unique, which nobody can contest with on that dimension. So just like an OTT or a TV cannot compete with the kind of viewers experience inside a theater, convenience is not what is the hallmark of a theater, So I think that's why to your question, will the model be hybrid? It has always been hybrid, and there has always been a windowing, and that windowing is really designed to maximize the revenue for all participants in the value chain, and largely the producer, and that's how it will remain. I think what has happened is, because of pandemic, when in your twin engine aircraft, if one engine is not running, I mean, it's no longer twin engine, right? It's got to use the remaining engine. So we are really overreading into this as to what is really going to happen, and OTT is going to run away and theaters are going to become dinosaurs. Simple question is, are theaters offering something which is unique and irreplaceable? As long as that answer is yes, they will remain relevant. And that's why they will remain a very important value creator. That's why stars have not been born in television. For years you had television, and for a moment I leave aside the Indian television because it's always been advertisement driven. But even US television, has it ever produced any stars? Stars have been born inside darkroom theater, large screen formats, and the star ecosystem itself generates a lot of value for many people. So I think there are clearly pluses which are coming because there are things that theaters offer which is unique to them, and that's why those will be preserved. I mean, $43 billion is the revenue from global box office. Nobody's going to abandon that in a hurry, even if the other revenue is almost now equaling it. So I think, to me, that's really the crux of it, that there is a lot that each of these windows have to offer, and they will therefore settle into a hybrid which maximizes the overall revenue pie. And that's the only rational way to doing this. Rest of it is all a very temporary. I mean, as I said, one engine is not working, so you will run on the other one.
Verma, you want to have a...
Yeah. So what is the hybrid for is the question. Is it to maximize the reach when the basically awareness of the film is it at the peak? Is that the hybrid for? So question is about what What do you use hybrid for? See, hybrid can't be about sending the film out to consumers on 2 platforms. It should be about reach. If it's about reach, it is possible. But the risk is this. On this 4300, which Gaurav mentioned earlier, which is about cities, towns, and villages, we have cinemas in about 2000 or 2100, not more than that. But the problem is, if you want to do a transactional, basically saying consumer, you pay and watch this film, I'm sending it to your house. They don't have the means, they're not paying for it. That's the problem. If they could afford to pay, there would be a cinema there. And that becomes a concern. So I think streaming probably will not exist on hybrid. I think is far away. Transactional might, but transactional affordability comes into question. I think that is a problem. If where cinemas are not there, I mean, I'll give an example. Something like in Tamil Nadu, if you have to put up a Hindi print film, at best we'll go to 75, 60 location. But if you put the film on transactional, it's going wider. Likewise in Andhra Pradesh, likewise in Mysore, likewise in Bengal, because we can't put up a Hindi film everywhere because it's competing with local product. So we can, but it is driven by geography. It will take some time. I think if we can bring in a little bit of, probably geo-blocking, also affordability, someone can test it. Eventually it will come in, but driven by geography more than by ease.
Okay. Gaurav Gandhi, you want to react to this?
I think I have multiple points to say. I want to keep it brief. I think first of all, I think we are talking the manufacturer creator language and not the consumer language. The fact of the matter is, there was a much debate about the fact that how will customers actually react when big movies come to theater, go straight to streaming. We have done 20 and others have done many more as well. And so people are watching and enjoying and the reach is growing and the revenues for the creators have also come through that. So I think where I agree with the hybrid model view, I think the hybrid at an overall lens that we look at it, there'll be certain movies we may make the choice to say, we will not want to take this route and we want to go to first to cinema and then follow it through, because the experience part Ajit mentioned is super critical. And there's some who say that we may want to take a different route and go straight to streaming or have an earlier collapse window. The fact of the matter is that each medium, to Ajit's point, has to sort of win and compete in a manner for its best advantage. And I think I don't think window is the advantage. It's the advantage is the experience, convenience, safety, access, reach, many things, right? Window is a result of that. I think the problem is happening is they're putting window before that, as against window as a result of what we want to achieve out of this as creators and as customers. That's one part. So I agree there'll be a hybrid, but a hybrid to my mind is movies making different choices depending on what they believe
what they're offering.
That's one. Second, I think, is affordability. I think India, I disagree when people say affordability, because I think it's not always about price, it's also about value. Customers in India is about value more than actually price. So when we talk about 4,300 towns and cities, these are paying customers who are buying at Prime or Prime Video and accessing it. They're not customers who are getting it free, right? That's one. To Gaurav Verma's point about transactional and SVOD. So yes, there are different models. So this is subscription video where people are buying a service to watch a bunch of content. They may be brought to that service through a show or a movie. There is another model around the world which is transactional. And I think it's not come to India in a meaningful way right now. But the fact of the matter is, if we look at 35 million people actually paying for tickets digitally today to come to cinemas, and look at the growth of just digital payments in the country, and look at the value that we could provide and tap on, there'll be creators who'll choose per capita revenue, saying I want to maximize how many customers can pay 400 rupees. Or there'll be creators who say, I want to maximize how many customers I can get with 100 rupees. Now that choice is of the creator who owns the film. I think the models will emerge, but we have to put the customer first and not our thinking on window first, because that's, I think, a little bit counterintuitive in my view. I'm not saying, like I told you, I'm a believer that the market for and is an and not or, it's for both. But the lens should be the tapping on to for the right reason. That's all I mean.
Fair enough. that's a great point. Akshay.
Sorry, can I say something on this?
Go for it. Go for
Sorry, Gaurav. Yes, please.
So Gaurav, the fun part is, I think I agree with you on Windows. I think we should think from a consumer point of view. But what happens is that streams, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to protect streams so that there's no overlap. Likewise, when you're working with, on your rights, you're also protecting a television window, right? Television and streaming going together is also hybrid, which doesn't happen. So everyone is trying to do is protect Windows. The only point which I was trying to make was, even if when you're protecting a window, you can still benefit from a geographical reach where cinema does not exist. Maybe digital has given that reach to all of us, I think, which we never thought it will, because we could not uplink and download from a DTH or.
That's
So
right.
streaming is much easier.
That's right.
That was the point which I made.
Fair point.
Just one last question that I'll throw at all of you, and I'm sure all of you have different perspectives to it. There's one element in the room that bothers all of us, and that is something that that somewhere bites into the revenues that all of us make, whether it's exhibitors, content creators, or streaming platforms, and that's piracy. And that's an ongoing battle that we've been fighting, and it's been a constant battle with the pirates, where obviously the leakage of revenues is something that bothers all of us, whether it's the creators, whether it's exhibitors, or the streaming platforms. Is there a way to fight this substantially enough to make sure that the leakages of revenues are minimized, if not stopped? Any of you, feel free to go, and maybe all of you, because there would be different perspectives of exhibitors, creators, and platforms here. Whoever wants to go first.
I got a first shot. I think we all. It is a genuine problem, Akshay. I think there's no doubt about it. At one level, piracy gives you an indication of demand, and which is untapped or or not being serviced. The other, it's a big loss of revenue for an opportunity for creators, streamers, everybody across the ecosystem, right? I don't think we have all found one magic formula or silver bullet that we can solve for it. We continue to take actions against it individually, collectively as industry, and so on. It's the fact that technology at one level is allowing us to do all the things we do, but also is challenging to keep pace with this. I think we do have a combination of our efforts, enforcement, legislation, and all things put together. And I think one of the things important is for everybody to come together and do this. I think individually, when we fight some of these things, and we all do, it's our efforts are like a whack-a-mole, right? You keep going after it, and I think this is one area where the industry needs to collaborate way more. And there are many associations like the AS and so on which do that. But I think much more is needed at our industry level as well. And some of the work that at CII and all we're trying to do is to try and find solutions to this. But again, I agree with you, it's a big problem and we need to do much more than we're doing right now.
Alok, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, I would say the punishment should be harsh. For example, Gaurav is absolutely right. Technology is literally, I would say the way it is, anybody can have a beautiful print. I'm talking from the screen with his phone. So you won't even come to know whether it's a pirated print or not. But if a guy is caught and you come to know who's done it, I would say that the punishment should be harsh so that the next guy who wants to do it refrains from doing it. It's eating away into the entire ecosystem. It's about thousands of crores of rupees being wasted. And whether these are various torrent sites or whether whatever it is, I think they should be blocked. But then you block one, another one pops up. But whoever is caught, the only way I can say is that exemplary punishment. Otherwise, we will all keep on talking about it year on year on year and nothing will happen. And it will only increase because today if you see pirated prints, they're absolutely crystal clear. So that has to be absolutely curtailed.
Right. Thank you, Alok. Those have been extremely interesting insights from all of you. Speaking from the point of view of the consumers of this wonderful conversation, I'm sure these plethora of thoughts that all of you have thrown at them have been extremely enriching. I'm sure all the students, all the alumni of LSE and everyone else who's logged in to watch this live is definitely benefiting greatly with some insights, with some thoughts, with some knowledge that would be very useful for them. So a big thank you to all of you panelists. Thank you to my co-moderator Gaurav for doing a wonderful job. We'll take it. We'll move on to the questions that have been thrown in by the students, and that shall be taken over by Pranav. Over to you, Pranav.
All right, thank you, Gaurav and Akshay, and all our panelists for an insightful discussion. So I'll now be asking our panelists some questions that are sent by our audience through the Q&A box. The first question is by Rashmi Diondi. How is success understood for content on OTT platforms, like the theoretical counterpart has bio collections? And also, which business capabilities are primarily vital for OTT players to evolve and sustain in their businesses? And by the way, all these questions are open to anyone. It's not directed to any single specific panelist. So yeah.
I could go first, and folks can please add. Your first question was really about success metrics. Was that the right one? Yeah. So I think different success metrics for different things. So if you look at content, you would definitely look at, how many viewers came in, how many new viewers came in, how much they watch, did they complete the show, movies, and so on. So those are obvious ones that we look at. I think ultimately there is the tangible that we talk about, and there's the intangible that is about customer love and about fandom. And I think some of the most amazing shows and movies are about the fandom that they generate and how they become part of the culture zeitgeist. Now, these are slightly harder to measure means, but there are many metrics to look at that as well, through social, through your researches that you might do. So I think it's a combination of the hard and soft factors when you look at content, of when you look at how many viewers and how much do they watch and so on, but also really how likely are they to come and watch the next season? How many characters have lived beyond? Have lived beyond from point of series and so on. So I think that's a combination. And I think I'm sure Ajit and Gaurav Verma can add from their point of view and their experience on, how they have looked at, their content on streaming services.
See, if I get too many texts, I believe it's doing well because platforms are not sharing anything. If everyone writes to me saying that we saw it, I assume it's good. I think at some point of time, I think platforms should start sharing numbers, because as creators, as producers, we would love to see how audience have reacted. I think we get something which is more on a private note, which I think probably, which is also limited, but we do get some information. But it's, yeah, we would love to have more.
Do you have a point of view on this?
I think it's from a maker point of view, it's fairly straightforward. I think the acid test for a maker is, are you getting into a subsequent season or not, really? Because I think if there is enough currency with the platform, then the platform clearly has found certain segment with which the show has resonated, and if not at a very higher level of matrix of measuring any entertainment, which is really the time spent in viewing per capita, even if it doesn't measure up on that, there must be some other measure because of which it's working with some cohort. So I think the test really is whether you are able to sort of get into subsequent seasons, whether you are able to get into spin-offs, whether some of those characters have been much loved. And I think that idiom is not different at all to how content has always been. If you are able to create, as Gaurav was saying, fandom or a universe which you can really milk, it's about how much can you milk the story, how much can you milk the characters. If you can do a lot of that, then I think your content has really succeeded. The stickiness. So I think that science is really not change in that sense, although some of our friends in OTT don't share as much about it. But I think all we get to know is, okay, you get a second season, you're all right.
I think social social media does have to give a good external, easily comparable barometer of conversations, of word of mouth, of actually moving from like to recommendation. And I think a lot of that, and therefore with each platform and each service will have their own sort of metrics at the different levels of subscribers and so on. But when you look at it sort of at a lens across the board, you're able to compare that really well. So I think that's another way of looking at it objectively from the outside as well.
On that very note, let me actually take this to Alok. Alok, unlike, here we're talking about data in terms of consumption. And I guess box office numbers are one possibly the most objective barometer there is for any kind of content out there across platforms, which gauges the number of viewers who have access that content.
Yeah.
But then that data is it's the talk of the town. Exhibitors or the producers may not speak as much about it as the guy on the street is. What do you make out of that? And does that really build up or add to the excitement around the content? Does that speak about the kind of draw and traction that it that it generates?
So Akshay, what are you talking about? You're talking about what people talk about that particular movie outside?
The box office numbers, which have become the talk of the town, which everyone from
Right.
you take a taxi and you'll have a taxi a taxi wala speaking
Sure.
about a movie like wo to 100 crore ki achhi hogi.
Bilkul.
So what do you make out of that?
No, absolutely right. So again, these are talk points. And you rightly said that the movie, the moment it hits that magical 100 crore mark, everybody knows about it. Not that people advertise or the producers advertise, but by word of mouth, the word travels. And that buzz gets in more people inside the theater. So I would say that that's a very unscientific way, but that's a very, I would say, a desi way of talking about numbers. And also what I've seen in this industry in the last 20 years, Akshay, is that more than the numbers, people talk about the buzz which is going around. That the buzz, Hindi mein they say the garmi hai picture mein, which means that yes, it's nice, it's there to go and watch the movie, irrespective of the numbers which are there. So you're right, the sales, the footfalls, the net collections, everybody knows about it. But the softer way of looking at it is that buzz or that garmi in that movie, which people talk about, and that pulls in more crowd into the theaters.
In fact, I would want to add another point to what Alok said. In fact, sometimes box office numbers are not at all an indicator as well. On the contrary, to the effect of a film. I mean, I'm sitting on a bunch of films like that. If I go by purely my box office footfalls, only 60 lakh people have watched Queen in this country, and maybe 70 lakh people have watched Andhadhun. Yeah. But just see the amount of popular culture impact it has, the amount of cross-referencing it does in all sorts of discussions. I'm sure more than 60 lakh people have viewed it. Yeah. So sometimes theatrical collections actually do no justice. I mean, look at Gangs of Wasseypur. I don't want to even talk about the box office numbers. They may not be a talking point, but just look at the cult value of the film. So I think certain things, some of these numbers actually don't reveal as much. And actually quite sort of on the contrary hide as to what the impact, the cultural impact and the love for that film is.
Yeah, and I agree, Ajit. And that's really my point. I think what happens there is that you're trying to equate everything. You're going back to having the single currency for different segment of audiences. And that somewhere, in my view, is not a significant, it's not really a right metric for the segment that the movie was made for and what it did beyond. So I agree with you.
I mean, Dil Chahta Hai, there are certain sections of distributors who actually call it a flop. Can you imagine that? Some very, very traditional people, they say that it's a myth that film is a success and that film is a cultural icon. So I think it's a question of how are you defining value? And if you are going to peg value to only one or two parameters, actually maybe you will undermine value.
Yeah, okay, everyone's had a take on this. Gaurav, Verma has been listening silently. You have a take on this? Do numbers lie?
Numbers, I think, what do numbers reflect? It's about the interest in the film or a product, right? I think the platforms have a reason. I think when the film does well on platforms are also just like us producers are putting out numbers second day. It's not, look at last year. I think there are 3 or 4 films where numbers came the next day from platforms. So everyone loves to put out numbers. It's just a reflective of how well the film has been received, but irrespective of where the film is landing. It doesn't matter where the film is landing. Ultimately, it's about engaging with consumer, having the conversation, which Gaurav Gandhi earlier said. If the conversation is positive, I think it will continue to grow. I think that's what we care about. And numbers do help. It's not the numbers, they don't. I mean, if box office helps, streaming number helps, every other number helps, because it's an indication of where the film is going. That's the only way to measure it, because there's no way to measure a conversation. But the Garmi ka, there's no barometer. As I looked at, how do you put a barometer on Garmi saying that now measure Garmi? It's only conversation, and conversation should lead to a box office, whether it's streaming number, box office number, or any other number. I think that's the only way.
Very interesting. Back at you, Pranav.
Right. I mean, due to time constraints, I mean, we do have a lot more Q&As, but there's one specific Q&A that we want to bring it forward by Gayatri Manglaville. This is a good one. So has the high demand of content led to the loss of quality? So OTT has distinguished itself from traditional TV serials by being a breath of fresh air that goes beyond the regressive content of TV. So how can the sector ensure that the quality of the content is actually not compromised? Open to you guys. Yeah.
Ajit, you want to take this first?
Yeah, I think it's a question of when you use the word regressive. My regressive could be your progressive. I could look down upon Nagin and say how regressive, and another bunch of millions of housewives could actually get their kicks out of watching Nagin. So I think we tend to do this, which is my kind of content is greener or more progressive than your kind of content. I think content is best left to the cohorts or the segments that it is meant to appeal. That's how the Saas and Bahu serials are relevant to the television ecosystem. And please don't go and watch it. Don't go and watch it if you find it aggressive. Watch something else which excites you. So I think that's really about it's really about what content addresses which segment, and each segment, if it's going to label the other segment, it will find some unique name for it. Regressive is just one of them.
Gaurav, you want to take this? I think this is very apt for you.
I think Ajit, I agree with the point about labeling. I think Ajit makes a good point about what works for one may not work for the other, and so on. Though I do feel that in general, and it's not about a show, in general, the television, the currency, and the economic model led to more volume. And that led to the fact that we're churning out hundreds of episodes in a year, 300 episodes in a year, and then producing an episode in 1.5 days of shift and getting it out. Like, you can, if you have to do that, you will go towards volume over quality, because that model led you to do that. And I think what we were talking about earlier is that streaming in a way freed up from that model. You're not confined to that 22-minute episode, or have to make only like 200 episodes or whatever. There were times when broadcasters may not commission shows which were limited episode series, because like, hey, by the time we actually get ratings on this, the show's over. Like, how do we make money on advertising on it? Because the model was an ad-led model. So I think it's important to see the context in which that model has emerged, and not just to say like that, label it. And I think and the model in streaming allows you to do many more things, and Ajit spoke very eloquently about it earlier, and so did Gaurav. So I think therefore they're two different things. We are where we are. India never had premium TV like HBO, and Showtime was there in the US before streaming came. So we are seeing those shows in India for the first time on streaming. And again, that's function of the distribution and the television model that was there. So I think the context is important there before we start labeling it, which I think we should not on labeling point of view particularly. Yeah.
Pranav, you can take one last question, and then I think then we can have the closing address. Pranav, do you want to go?
Of course, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So the next question is by Jaydeep Pandya. So how has the pricing changed for the OTT content in terms of what you are buying? Would it say it's a buyer's market, or would you say it's a seller's market?
There are more sellers than buyers here, so let the sellers talk first. I was going to come to the sellers first. Yes, but yes, sellers. Gaurav Verma, would you like to start?
About the pricing? See, pricing is a factor of what revenue streams are doing. It's not that, just think of a situation, Alok will hate this. If theatrical starts crashing the way it was last year, OTT prices will not sustain. Till the time you have theatrical, OTT prices are there. So they coexist. And they will continue to coexist. And prices are largely based on what's the expectation from the product. If it's a premium product based on a cheaper price, it's not based on the cost. It's based on what's expected from the product. I think largely it's driven by that. And I think a buyer or a seller probably decides based on that, what you expect from a film to do. And if it does well, if you expect it to do well at box office or streaming or television, you'll probably figure out a combination of and come back to an actual price. I think that's how it is driven. I think so, yeah.
I think the pricing is not the OTT pricing is not driven out of the exhibitor's balance sheet, as Gaurav Verma eloquently alleges. I think it is driven out of their own very strong balance sheets, which are really, focused at building categories. I mean, look at what Amazon is doing. Netflix is still a pure play content, but Amazon is actually building a very, very, complex proposition where you're bundling really so many advantages. And therefore, I think the pricing is really driven by their overall quest to build a completely different consumer behavior and a consumer segment, which is they're almost building a new planet, and they have the balance sheet to do that. So I think in that sense, it's really both a buyers and sellers market. I say so because to the sellers, actually, there is a very strong option which is available, which is very well funded, and therefore, and typically, that's always been the bane of people in making content, that there has been never a guy who's got such a strong balance sheet to pay for it. There is in this case, and it's also a buyer's market because, yes, I mean, it's a duopoly overall if you look at it, and they're the only two people who are buying. So it's a happy situation at the moment. But I agree with Gaurav that with a lot of consolidation, the situation may not remain as happy as all of us are thinking right now.
No, so clarifying on this, Ajit, my point was not that it's at the expense of exhibitors. The only thing which I'm saying is, as long as you have exhibition, as long as you have theatrical revenue, just think of a film for an actor who does not have a theatrical release. Do you get the same price? Answer is no. So what I'm saying is, as long as theatrical exists, the prices will be different. If theatrical does not exist, prices will be different. I think that's the only point which I'm trying to make. If 2020 unfortunately carries forward, the pricing is going to change for everyone. Your one stream is going to collapse, which is contributing to 60-65%. I think
all I'm saying is that the pricing is determined more by the demand that the platforms are setting, and it's coming more from an inward ambition of building a certain consumer base and category behavior rather than the power or the availability of any other segment. But of course, I do concede that having another buyer does put a windowing pressure on these people, and you arrive at some kind of equilibrium.
Also, probably you can add the word vacuum last year. I think vacuum of content, probably that also led to pricing.
Of course.
Can necessarily be true in future. So I think, yeah.
Gaurav Gandhi, you want to take seller's market or a buyer's market?
It's time for him to pronounce the judgment.
Not at all. Far from it. I think I see it in two ways. One is that the exciting part about our content business here is that there is so many creators, and the next hit can come from anywhere, and great content gets its price. So that's one part of it. So it's not about saying one creator saying I've got all the movies and this is my price, as against that's one. The second part of it is that from the services point of view, like ours, ultimately we're providing value to the customer at $999 a year or $129 a month, and long-term view of business. We are here to be able to say, how do we serve that customer with the content? So each of us will take decisions at that point which makes sense for our metrics that we look at. And I agree with Ajit to the extent that, like, the metric is, he's looking at his metric when he's selling, and I'm looking at mine when somebody is making a decision to acquire. So I think it's not a straightforward thing of seller and buyer market. I think there are, at one end we say there are 40 streamers in India, and there are broadcasting streamers who get all the content from their parent cos in any case, and so on. So I think there are many, at least 10, 12, 15 streamers who have a lot of content, and I don't think it's either or, really, in my view, at all, a buyer or seller market. I think it's a pretty good, healthy play across both, and it's very early days in the business, like I mentioned earlier. A long way to go for us and large customers base to entertain.
Thank you, Gaurav. Sure.
Thank you so much, Gaurav, Ajit, Alok, and Gaurav again for those lovely insights. These have been very enriching. And if there's one key takeaway that I have from this conversation, it's the fact that in this whole matrix of streaming, theatrical, satellite, and everything else that's coming at us, if there is one winner in this whole equation, it's the consumers. Yes, there is the convenience of streaming that's coming into play. Yes, there is the unique experience of the theatrical format that is out there. And that will, as all the listeners of this conversation may have realized, result in a phenomenal, massive growth of the entertainment sector in India and globally. Let's hope and wish in the future that all of us here, whether it's the theaters, whether it's the streaming platforms, the content creators, and more so the consumers, win and get a good game out of it. Thank you so much, LSE, for having all of us over. Thank you, Gaurav, Ajit, and Alok for for your valuable insights, and thank you, Gaurav Bhairwani, for being a wonderful co-moderator. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Well, we would like to now thank all our panelists and our moderators for putting on an amazing discussion, and also for our audience for tuning in. We certainly gained a lot of insights, and thank you so much for taking your time. Yeah.
Thanks again.